Is being ambidextrous a major advantage in tennis? And let's explore that. And here's a very good ambidextrous tennis player, a junior tennis player, Davidov. And this footage is courtesy of Zoo Tennis. This footage was a couple years ago already, but I think Davidov plays exactly the same way. And let's take a look at how he does his lefty forehand and righty forehand. So let's check out how Tio performs his lefty and righty forehand. And in this ready position, he has his left hand on the grip handle itself and his right hand covering his left hand. Well, this is how he prepares all his strokes here. And notice that he'll go with his righty forehand on this shot. So notice how he switches his hands very quickly. Very impressive how he quickly switches hands. So you can see his right hand goes on the grip handle and then the left hand goes on the throat of the racket. And now he's doing this righty forehand. But when he sets up again, going into the ready position, he puts his left hand back on the grip handle with his right hand covering it. And then he goes with this lefty forehand. So two very impressive forehands for Tio Davidov here. So here's the problem, and I'll give you the answer right now. Being ambidextrous is a major disadvantage. I don't think it's an advantage at all. It's a major disadvantage because of the decision-making process. When you switch hands, that's an extra decision you have to make. It's not just the stroke, right? It's not just performing the lefty forehand or the righty forehand. You are switching the hands, right? And for a lot of tennis players, this is very confusing. And I mentioned this in my previous video, the biggest problem of being ambidextrous. It's that decision making. And so let's explain this more. Let's pretend Tio here has 8 arms, like a spider, right? 8 arms, right? 8 arms. And he has to choose, right? He has to choose which hand that he's going to perform that forehand stroke, right? So he has 8 different choices, 8 different ways of hitting that forehand. And it's the same way with 2 hands, right? Same way with 2 arms. You have a decision to make which hand will be the dominant hand, the left hand or the right hand. And for me, right, I'm not ambidextrous. I don't have to make that decision at all. My right hand is going to be my dominant hand. It's going to be there on the grip handle. And so, again, I don't know why a lot of tennis players think that, oh, it's not an extra decision-making process. It's very much an extra decision-making process. If you have 2 hands, if you're ambidextrous, you have 8 arms, right? You have more choices. You have more choices to try to hit a forehand with, right? So that extra decision-making process is happening inside the head, and it slows you down. It slows you down just a bit, no matter how automatic the switching of the hands is. And Tio switches his hands very quickly, but that, I think, is a major disadvantage. And say you don't believe my logic at all, that this is an extra decision-making process. Well, why did Brian Battistone create this racket with 2 handles? He's a former tennis professional who was ambidextrous, and he developed this 2-handled racket, and I'll show it to you on a picture here, to alleviate that decision-making process. So both of his hands are on 2 different grip handles, but it's still an extra decision, right? And it could be alleviated as well if the rule changes in tennis where you can play with 2 rackets at the same time. So picture Tio here with not just 1 racket, but with 2 rackets. Then, yes, the decision-making can be alleviated. But again, it's still another decision-making process. So that extra decision for the ambidextrous tennis player, you know, it's good to have choice, right? But you know, too much choice can paralyze you. Here's also why it's a disadvantage. And think about being ambidextrous, right? You would think that it's something that is special, and it is special to be ambidextrous. You use a left-handed forehand, righty forehand. You have 2 forehands. Wow, that's awesome. But it can never be a weapon, right? Just having 2 forehands in itself cannot be a weapon. In order for, say, Teo here to make being ambidextrous a weapon, both his lefty forehand and righty forehand need to be weapons, need to be superlative, need to be awesome. Basically, if you see Roger Federer, right? He had an awesome forehand, a weapon. That forehand is a weapon, right? Well, say he's ambidextrous. That lefty forehand of his needs to be equal to the weaponry of that actual forehand, right? So if you have two very, very awesome forehands, right? Not just good forehands, not just okay forehands, right? But two of them being super awesome, then yes, I could see that as a weapon. But, being ambidextrous in itself, right? It's not enough, right? What are the advantages of being ambidextrous? It's just basically you have more reach and you could have a forehand, right? But, hitting top spins all day on both sides of the court, it doesn't really mean much, right? And maybe you could be a little bit more defensive. Maybe you could play better defense, right? You could reach out a little bit more, but I don't see like those defensive skills, as a weapon, right? Being ambidextrous and playing super great defense. Well, yeah, maybe if you are Rafael Nadal, but again, the weaponry is coming from the footwork, right? It's not coming from being ambidextrous. So, it's a false hope. I think it's a false hope for many proponents of being ambidextrous that, oh, this is the answer to what will be the greatest player of all time. Whoever is going to be the best player of all time in all of history, well, they need to be ambidextrous. Oh, imagine they have two forehands there. Well, it's not enough. It's not enough to be an awesome tennis player. But anyway, I'm rooting for Teo here, rooting for him to become a great college tennis player and maybe even a professional, and maybe prove me wrong. Maybe he'll win a slam being ambidextrous. But if he does win a slam, it's going to be because he has two awesome forehands. And remember, just because you have an extra shot, an extra choice, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better, right? Just go to a grocery store. Again, I've mentioned this type of example before, but go to a grocery store and, you're picking out some oat milk. I like oat milk. And right now, when I go to the grocery store, there's like 4, 5 different type of brands of oat milk. One is on sale, one is supposedly better. You look at the nutritional facts and you're there all of a sudden for a good 10 minutes just trying to figure out which oat milk to buy. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, yeah, choice is a good thing, but if you're there for too long, you're just wasting your time. And tennis is all about time. It's all about trying to think quickly there and performing your stroke. And you can't be wasting time. You can't be paralyzed out there. So ambidexterity, I think, is a major disadvantage. If you enjoyed this video, kindly do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.